Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about faith and finances, and we have Steve to help me do it. One of the biggest questions that we have when it comes to faith and finances is what does it mean to be a good steward of my money?
Danny, that is a huge question.
It-
Uh, People have written books on this. People have developed entire um, videos, podcasts, courses on that topic. I look forward to exploring it with you. I don't have a succinct answer for you because it's so multifaceted. I think steward in itself means handling what God's given you wisely
Mhm.
and investing it wisely. Um, I say the word invest. I don't necessarily mean investing in markets or companies, but investing in life, in everything you have.
Yeah, and I know this is a broad question. It's a question that we could just speak hours and hours upon it, right? But that's kind of like the main questions that we're going to be diving deep into this episode.
Excellent.
So is it okay for Christians to just want to be successful and make money, right? Like
Mm.
is it okay? How do we manage that when it comes to just people wanting to be successful?
Yeah, Danny, great question. I know that looking back at some of the history of the United States and where we've come from, sometimes the church has honored um, people who are seem more pious or have less, in fact, and are saying that they're more godly because of that. But we don't really find that in the Bible. Um, God doesn't say, have less so that you can serve me. God says, serve me with everything that you have, and that difference is real. It's big. That's we are um, God's blessing us in order for us to give back. And one of my favorite scriptures on this topic is David's prayer
Hmm.
in 1 Chronicles 29, where he says, he goes through how God's blessed him, how God's blessed Israel and made them prosper in this time, and ends it with, who am I and who are my people that uh, we are allowed to give as generously as this. And so God's really, in that situation, blessed David, but not so that David could boast in his riches. He blessed David so David could give back and honor God through serving his people well.
Yeah, because when do we draw the line when it comes to, for example, a Christian wanting to be successful and wanting to just spend and have a little bit of nicer things?
Yeah,
When do we draw that line of is God is blessing me with what I have,
yeah,
or I am going into a road of I'm doing this on my own, right? When
yeah,
do we draw that line?
yeah. And I feel like you and I could give some examples or case studies and say, oh, this is somebody who's given up everything and is so proud of that they're on this side. Whereas you could give an example of someone who's chasing after gold and putting his trust in gold. But I think the main thing here is that God is looking at your heart,
Hmm.
and God is really concerned about your heart. And there's, I already gave that example of David, but of course Jesus talks about faith and finance a lot, and he talks about the the man who had a successful harvest, and he, instead of giving from his harvest, he decided, I don't want to work anymore. I'm going to store up everything that I've gotten. I'm going to tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger barns, and then I'm going to relax. Um, and God says, uh, that's not right. That's not what he should do, because what he's doing is all for himself. He's hoarding it for himself. That passage ends with him saying that we should be rich towards God.
Hmm.
And rich towards God is, I mean, that's all encompassing, right? So everything that I have rich towards God. It's a heart attitude when God's given me something. It doesn't matter. Paul talks about, I've learned the secret of being satisfied in all situations, whether rich or poor. It's that heart attitude. For Paul, Jesus in me, allowing me to be satisfied.
Yeah, is that posture of am I looking to get nicer things because I'm not satisfied with what I have, and it's that desire of wanting to reach higher and higher, and that's not gonna satisfy you in any sort of way, or just wanting to oh, let me have a little bit of nicer thing, but I am content with the situation where God has me, right?
Yeah. Contentment is a huge word. Budgets are built on contentment, and budgets are destroyed on discontentment, where you always want to look better than your neighbor or have more than somebody else you know. That's a heart issue of not being content. And so, I love that you said that word, because that hits when I have a budget and I'm setting it up and I'm looking at, all right, income, outcome, or outflow. And I'm going through and saying, all right, so what do I have coming in? What do I have going out? And what's left, right? And so, of course, as we set up this budget, and I teach people about this, that what you want to do is you want to look at, right, have an accurate image of what you have coming in.
Mm-hmm.
You first decide, how much am I giving, right? And I set that aside right away. That's the first fruit. That's the first thing that comes off my budget. What am I giving? Where am I giving it? I can decide that. I can make a decision with my spouse. But what am I giving? Second, what do we need to save? What are we looking for in the future? How much margin do we want in our budget? Margin is another key word of not getting to a point where I'm at the edge, spending every dime I have. Margin allows us to be generous. Margin allows us to flex if we have an emergency. And then finally to then say, all right, so what are my expenses? What's my necessary, my housing, and then what are my optional expenses? And then living within that band. I grew up and I read some articles, and I remember these articles. They stuck with me. It's a little strange, but I remember feeling like I was sinning if I wanted to go buy an expensive coffee, because it's something for me. And I was like, some of the things I read made it seem like that's a sin. Like I didn't have the $5 to give to missions because I wasted it on myself, on my coffee. But what I've come to realize is that the decision, so the savings decision, the giving decision, and the spending decision in my budget today has already been made. I know what's coming in. I've decided what to give. I've decided what to save. And now I have the spending. And I can be flexible in that spending in order to, flex and get a coffee if I want to, or take my family out to eat if I want to. And so that has freed me up in a big way as far as pursuing, fun things, being content, and having those bounds, not going the fence posts of not going across the spending way too much, because I know the limit, because I've already set aside the giving and the saving.
Yeah, it's interesting because when it comes to budgeting, pride and ego is what tends to derail your budgeting, I want to say. Because wanting to appease in the sense of wanting to show off with what you have, wanting to oh, look at what I just bought. Look at what I have. That's the statue of how big I am because of how much I have, right?
Right.
Is that of we have to find that balance between it's okay to spend a little bit of money. It's not wrong to do so, right? It's not wrong to want to again, like you said, go buy a little bit of a better quality coffee, right? But again, finding that balance between giving and also wanting to spend money, right?
Right. And if I come to the end of the month and I can't afford it, the decision's already made for me.
Yeah.
I don't get it. And that's with the coffee, that's with everything. Um, I think there's both sides, and budgeting is an important topic, and we can go there a little bit further if you want to. You know, we've talked about the pride and ego is what you just brought up, and how that busts a budget in one direction. I've also seen it where not knowing both your income and daily expenses has caused people to fear spending money. And so they're like, I don't know. I don't know what I have. So I probably don't have anything. So I'm not going to spend it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a different side where they're trying to be wise, but they don't understand the picture. They don't have the knowledge of the incomes and outflows of their budget. And so they're not able to be a blessing. They're not able to give. They're not able to just, bless their family with a meal out or something like that.
Yeah. Something that always resonated with me, that this is something my dad always told me, is like, how much you make is not how much the paycheck that you get at the beginning of the month is. How much you make is how much you have left after you went through like your spending, right?
Yeah.
Because if it came in and then you spent it right away, if you spent it all, you didn't make anything, right?
Right.
So it's finding that balance as well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And saving is important. And one of the statistics that I've come across because I've been studying this is that about half of the U.S. families cannot handle a $1,000 emergency in a month without going further into debt. And so, if you think about that, there's a $1,000 emergency. It happens, right?
Yeah. Especially in today's economy, it's a lot easier to have a $1,000 emergency, right? It's not something that's crazy.
Right. Yeah. And if you can't handle that, if you can't handle, like you say, at the end of the month, you're out every single month, then you have nothing to build into being able to handle or flex around that sort of emergency.
Yeah. And you mentioned a little bit about how at the beginning of the month you set aside what you want to give and what you're going to spend, right?
Yeah.
And I actually want to go a little bit deeper into that because what is tithe? Like I want to go a little bit into like what is tithe
Yeah.
and what our mindset is supposed to be when it comes to giving.
Yeah.
Right? Where are we supposed to be in that aspect of like, am I supposed to just, how do I decipher how much to give, right? How is that mindset that we have to have?
Yeah. Great question. And the word tithe literally means 10%. It was a function that the Israelites had in their society that 10% was given of what they have. Now, of course, that's sheep, cattle, whatever it was, the harvest, whatever came in, they would give 10% and call that a tithe. The New Testament doesn't dictate anywhere how much you should give. It says how to give with a joyful heart. And people can use that as an excuse that says like, the New Testament doesn't tell me how much to give, so I don't have a joyful heart right now, so I'm just not going to give. And I think the thing is, giving is a practice, like everything else, that as you give, you develop that heart for giving. As you start with your local church, which is kind of the community that God's put you in, and start there and start giving and seeing what God's blessing is bringing to those that you're giving to and how that's benefiting his kingdom. And that giving up something to God affects your heart.
Yeah, it's
and
a
allows you,
sacrifice.
and allows you to be more joyous and to give more joyously. And it's a snowball, if you will, into joyful giving.
Yeah, because one of the things that I think it's always uh taken out of context is how much like that like the amount that I'm giving, right? Sometimes we see passages in the Bible where it says that um the person gives less but with a joyful heart,
Mm,
it's um that has more of a like it has more value
yeah,
rather than the rich person that just throws out money because it's whatever he had left, right? But again, um I also feel like sometimes we take that out of context into being like, okay, I'm gonna give just a little bit with a joyful heart,
mm,
but I'm not giving essentially what I would say is not like God is not putting in my heart to give just this small piece. It's just there's a little bit of like greed behind it.
yeah.
So like how can we find that balance between, or how can we discern if what I'm giving is what God is calling me to give?
Yeah, yeah, great question. Um, you might want to refer back to a podcast with that you had with Emily
Yeah.
about discernment, from I don't know, a year ago, where you talks about meeting with God and figuring out how to discern stuff like that. The I think one author that I've read in my studies recently is Randy Alcorn, and he has great books on this exact subject. Um, one thing that he says is that tithing is the training wheels of giving. So
Interesting.
the Bible talks about 10%, and so he calls that a minimum. So if you're starting out giving, right? Maybe you're starting lower just because you don't have the capacity in your budget. Um, but getting to 10% is like getting to the training wheel stage. And then where do you go from there? Once God's working on your heart, He's going to make it easier and easier to give. Um, I think there's also this idea that everything is the Lord's, anyways. It's
Hmm.
not mine.
Yeah.
Um, and so, what am I giving? Well, I'm not. I'm releasing what God's allowed me to manage. Um, so I'm a project manager. And on some of my projects, the developer or the owner of the building, um, they want that building done, right? They want to be able to use that building. They want to be able to rent that building. They want people in. They want it done, and they want it done now. And so what they're going to do is they're going to pay fees to expedite that building, and they're going to say, whatever you have to spend. All right, that product, let's say it's glass. The glass is coming late. How much money do I have to pay so I get in the front of the production line for the glass so they can put it on my building and I can open sooner? And I think it hit me one day when I was driving home that so in that situation, I'm managing that guy's money, trying to help him build a building. In my life, I'm managing God's money, trying to build a kingdom.
Yeah.
And with that mindset, I'm like, holy cow, what does God want me to do to expedite the building of his kingdom? Where can a little pocket of extra money that I have, instead of squirreling it away for later and saying, what if, right? Where can I strategically place that in the kingdom to expedite the building of God's kingdom?
So you were talking about how that perspective of like expediting the building, how much do I need to put in to be able to expedite the result, right?
Yeah.
So does that correlate the same as like giving for us? Like, do we expedite God's kingdom, or like how does that really work?
Right. I think in general, I think of my initial giving, so what I've planned out from the beginning of the year, my tithe, not as an expediting cost, but as a regular funding of the building of the kingdom. Um, and it's the rhythm. You need both, right? You need that regular funding in order to build a building, and then also in certain situations you need the expediting. And so, in my mind, that expediting is the extra, is the oh I have a friend in need, and out of what God's given me, who am I, and how has God blessed me to be as generous as I am? I'm able to give something discreetly to that person. Maybe it's a missionary friend, maybe it's a pastor or an event that a church is having, and I'm allowed to, to use that. We support a Awana program. That's Awana is a kids Bible study program, youth program, and they have a bunch of schools set up on the continent of Africa in many different countries where they are allowed to run these programs through public facilities. And so funding these programs is, to me, that's an expediting cost. Like I have a little bit of money I can put towards that, and it's not a regular thing that I give to, but it's kind of a once, maybe twice a year type of thing where I'm going, yeah, this is really cool. Let me just give to the development of young believers on the continent of Africa for their belief development, for their mental, social, emotional development, and see what God does with that little bit.
Yeah, and that kind of like leads a little bit more into my next question, because we were talking about tithing. It's the minimum is 10%. We're talking a little bit about how tithing works, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into like tithe.
Sure.
Right. Now we've mentioned that tithing should go to your local church, but like, does that mean that 10%, does it have to go directly in one chunk, or can't you divide it in between ministries? Like, are you able to like split it into, like, for example, part of your tithe goes to Awana, part of my tithe goes to my local church? Like, is there like a specific way that needs to be structured?
Yeah. And what's the heart behind it? So, the fear with that I hear, and I'll point to the fear first, and then we can get a little further with that question. The fear that I hear, though, is, can I control how my church uses my money that I'm giving to my church? And I think that's when we have our hands out and our hands up to God, we're releasing some of that control. And if the local church is the primary way that God has set up for believers in my community to approach him, then I can give with my hands up and say, here it is, God. I respect the leaders that you have put in place to spend this wisely. Now, of course, we're human.
Yeah.
And our leaders are human. And there is a place where the money we're giving, it's possible in churches and ministries that it's mismanaged. And we actually had an issue with a ministry last year where we found out at the same time, we had a missionary partner that we were supporting. We found out at the same time that they did that their sending ministry was mismanaging the money. And obviously, well, they left that sending ministry. We also stopped giving immediately and said, all right, we're going to wait till you sort this out, and then we can start that giving again to you. And so I think if I'm going into tithe and saying, how can I buy myself a place of leadership at my church? That's not the right heart posture.
Yeah.
If I'm going into tithe going, hey, I respect my leaders, here it is, spend it wisely, build God's kingdom here, then that is, I keep saying it, the posture of the heart. How are you bringing that gift into God's kingdom?
Yeah. Also, how can we not get discouraged if we find ourselves in a situation where like the money that we're giving is being misused, right? How can we not get discouraged and wanting to just not give anymore, right? How can we get that in, like how can we still keep that mindset of like, God, I'm trusting in you. I'm releasing this
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though it is not being used properly. I am letting you work.
Yeah. 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 Whose money is it? And how is God working in the hearts of our leaders to manage that money well? Um, that's a great question. I think there's definitely a place for the leaders of the church, and God set up the structure in churches where the leaders are accountable to the people. And so if you really believe that your money's being mismanaged, um, I think it's your responsibility to talk to those leaders. I said your money, didn't I? If
Hmm.
you really believe that God's money that you've released is being mismanaged, it's your responsibility to go talk to the leaders and get their perspective. Go in listening, right? And not judging, not saying, why did you spend my money this way, right? Again, mine. But going in listening and saying, hey, most charities will publish their budgets and publish their financial reports at the end of the year. And that's a great time to come in and say, hey, I read the financial report and I saw something that made me have some questions, and approach the leaders and the elders in that way, in order to um, encourage and in order to provoke thought and to say, yeah, we're on the same team, um, using this for God's kingdom. Can you help me understand how it's really being used?
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the tithe being used towards God's kingdom, let's say I'm giving to my local church, but does that like is there a point where like I say like, okay, I'm benefiting myself when it comes to the local church providing ministries? Because for example, I'll give you this example that I have.
Yeah.
Recently I had a conversation with Michael, and we were talking about, because I'm the leader of our young adults ministry at our church,
Yeah.
and I want my tithe to go into the young adults budget to be able to provide a little bit more support when it comes to a retreat and wanting to lessen the load on them when it
Yeah.
comes to like them having to spend a lot of money to be able to be part of this retreat, because I don't want a financial that their decision of going
Yeah.
is based on a financial decision, right? I want to be able to provide um, as much help as I can, but at the same time, technically, is benefiting me as well
Yeah.
in the sense of like it's lowering the price for me as well. But like, I am, I'm also paying to serve, right? Because I am paying to sacrifice my time
Yeah.
and just serving God, right? So when do we draw that line of like, is this okay of doing, or like, is it if I'm getting a little bit of benefit, is that okay?
Right. Danny, I love your heart. And I've seen that in the youth ministry, and how you love those students, and um, just in how you're saying that you want to lower the cost of admission, and include more students and bring them with, in the journey that you have, that you're following God, bringing the students along to follow you following God. Um, that's incredible. So thank you for your ministry. Um, the question makes me think back to, all right, so look this up, right? Deuteronomy, I believe it's 22. It might be 20, might be 22. It's in that range, where they're talking about the tithe. And this struck me. I've read this passage several times, but about 2, 3 months ago, I read it again, as I was preparing to teach a class on finance. And it really hit me. It's talking about the tithe, and it says, once you have your harvest, take your grain, take your tenth of your grain, so take your tithe, bring it to the house of the Lord, and eat it. Rejoice with the priests and eat it there in the presence of God. And I read that and I go, wait a second, what's going on? They're being asked to enjoy that tenth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, that's the greatest thing. That's the way to have that relationship with God, to enjoy Him. And I think what you're describing is exactly that. That you, not only your heart for the young people, but your heart for enjoying God. You're investing in His ministry to you. You're investing in the worship that you can do with the youth, and you're investing in the students that you're bringing along on this journey.
Yeah, because I feel like it's really easy to take out of context, like when it comes to like giving and the reasoning behind it, or the idea of like, if I give, I can't, like, I shouldn't benefit from it. Like, it would have to be used separately to what I'm doing. I cannot receive back from that, right?
Sure.
And the other thing, like, and this ties a little bit more into it, um, is that tithing, I've also heard when it comes to like people saying like, if you're tithing, God is gonna bless you more. Like is
Yeah.
that like,
Yeah.
because we're putting a correlation into like tithe equals more wealth, or like tithe equals more blessings.
Right.
Is that like, does that go into that same passage of Deuteronomy of like us enjoying that grain with, like, in that they're saying like, bring it to the priest and like enjoy that 10% wheat with the priest? Like,
Yeah.
does that fall in that same range?
Yeah. Well, I think the verse that's being used there is in Micah, where it says, "Bring the whole tithe into my house and watch as I open the floodgates of blessing on you." And you people in our Western culture often have that correlation, that blessing, money,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
God says He's going to bless me. That means I'm going to be rich. That means I should go buy my car now in debt because He's going to provide a way to pay for it. And it never says money in that, right? So God tells us not to worry. God tells us to have a heart posture, a humble heart posture before Him. I think if you're giving because you want to be blessed, you need to check your heart.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving because you want more money, you need to check your heart. I think if you're, again, bringing God's money back to Him with open arms, and saying thank you, I think that's the correct, humble, contrite heart posture, position before God.
Yeah. Now, how can we, because also a huge part, I know that we're not technically supposed to um be worrying about what people think about us when it comes to giving. This is something that it's a this is something that it's between me and God
Yeah.
when it comes to my giving, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to explain it to other people. But um for some people that like, it's a little bit harder to like set that boundary apart,
Yeah.
and to like, how can you provide them a little bit more comfort when it comes to giving, in the sense of like, how is this going to look towards other people?
Sure. I think we've, as a Western society in the U.S., I think we've swung too far on the side of don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. where and different churches are different, right? And this is just an example that I've seen. So in some churches we might have the opposite, but in some churches it's we are almost like ashamed that we're giving. We're trying to hide it so much, trying to sneak it in so that no one actually sees us, because we have that mentality that no one should know, right? And there is a place, I believe there's a place where my giving can inspire somebody else's giving, where my basically explaining or telling or sharing that I have been faithful in my tithe should inspire somebody else to say, wow, I can do that too. And obviously there has to be this humility in there where I'm not going to share and say, hey, look at me, I'm better than you because I've been faithful to my tithe.
Yeah.
But to say like, all right, guys, here's an opportunity. Let's work together and let's knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And do it in Christ's name. Each one of you, let's look at our budgets and see what God can, what we can offer up of God's money back to Him for this specific thing.
Yeah, I feel like giving can inspire people. And again, I have a funny story when it comes to that. I don't know if I had the right mindset when I did it, because I was a little kid.
Sure.
I remember I was 9, so like I was little.
Yep.
I was just trying to like follow God and do like what I was taught to do, right? I remember that I had an uncle that gave me a $20 bill. And then it was Sunday. And then we went to church with my family and I was like, "You know what? I feel convicted to like give this
Yeah.
at church."
Yeah.
Right? It came the time of the offering and I felt convicted to just give it fully. And as a kid, when you get money, the first thing that comes to mind is like, how many toys can I buy with this?
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
And this was at a time where I was having a vacation here in the U.S. because I used to live in Guatemala. So like, not only being in the mindset of like, I'm in a vacation, I got money, how can I spend it on this vacation, right?
Yeah.
And I was with my grandma. My grandma was sitting right next to me. And then she saw me pull out the $20 bill and she was like, "They just gave this to you. Let me break it for you. Like, give 10. Don't give it all, but give 10. Have a little bit of money for you to like spend."
Yeah.
Her heart wasn't just, she was just looking out to like, for me, just have a little bit to spend, right? Enjoy it, right?
Yeah.
But my mindset was like, no, I'm going to give it because I know God is going to provide it and he's going to bless me, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel convicted. And it's funny because she will remember this story for the longest time, because I ended up just being like, nope, I am gonna give it because I know God is gonna back up this giving, right? He's gonna bless me because my heart is convicted to giving this.
Yeah.
And then it's so funny because at the end of the service, this is a church up in Boston where like my family's up there, so they were the pastors. So they didn't know I gave because they're not tracking that right in that moment, right?
Sure.
But it's funny because another uncle came and gave me a $40 bill. Like they gave me like 220s essentially, but like he gave me 40.
Yeah.
So it is funny because I inspired my grandma to be like, okay, no, like he was actually putting faith behind this, right? I don't know if I had the right mindset when I was a little kid, but it is interesting because giving can inspire other people to like build upon their faith.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. And Jesus calls us faith like a child,
Yeah.
right? Because you were fully secure in knowing that your needs were going to be taken care of. And so you had that extra and you're like, God, here it is. Yeah, I love it. Great story.
And that ties back into like benefiting me when it comes to like tithe equals more wealth, right? And I feel like we have a little bit of a misunderstanding on that. Like you said, it like tithe doesn't equal more money, right?
Mm,
It just blessings. It, the Bible says more blessings, but like it doesn't really put out that it's like, oh, when you give, God is gonna make you rich,
right,
right?
right.
But that also goes into how our mindset is supposed to be when it comes to giving,
Yeah.
right?
God loves a cheerful giver.
Yeah,
I think, again, without practice, it's tough to be cheerful.
yeah,
If you feel like, oh, I have to, or I feel guilty, right? Because I haven't practiced the regular giving, um, then yeah, it's tough to have that joy.
yeah. But that also brings me into just touching a little bit more into like the aspect of like giving, right?
Sure.
Uh we are called to give. We're called to give the tithe and everything. But does God call people to give everything away, right?
Mm.
Um, does
Yeah.
like and because I'm bringing it through a reference. I'm referencing Luke chapter 14 verse 33,
Yeah.
right? It says, so you can't become my disciple without giving everything you own,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about our mindset when it comes to giving. We talked about that we have to have a cheerful heart when it comes to giving. But is it financially, when do we draw that line between God convicting us to give everything and also like wanting to be financially responsible, right?
Sure. 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 Um, let's come back to the financially responsible part. I think the first question just brings to mind the story of Jim Elliot. And I don't know if you know this story, but he was a missionary probably 50 years ago. Um, and he wrote in his journal um, that he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he can never lose. And he's talking about a spiritual investment um, that you are, again, that you're taking and you're saying, God, here's my investment, here's my everything. Um, and the story of Jim Elliot is that he um, worked for a missions organization, and he was delivering goods and supplies to a native population, I believe in South America. I forget the country, but he would bring the supplies into them, and he just had this heart that God had laid on him a conviction that he wanted this tribe to believe in God. And so he started with that initial contact of, bringing the supplies in and giving gifts. Um, and then finally he decided to stay overnight. And in that overnight, the tribe killed him and took his life. And the amazing part is that Jim Elliot's wife came back to that tribe and continued the ministry that her husband had left. And those the people of the tribe, when they saw that, right, they saw that heart that she had for them, and they said, "Why are you coming back to us? Because we killed your husband. Aren't you mad at us? Aren't you angry at us?" And she got to share the gospel with them, and because of that, the entire tribe turned their lives over to God. Um, and that's an example of somebody who gave it all, right? Mm-hmm. And God called him. It was a specific call in his life that God said, "Go, give everything, and I'm sending you to this tribe." And how did he get there? Right? How did he get the supplies? How did he get the airplane? How did he get the college education? Somebody had to send him. And Paul talks about this as well. How did he go? Somebody sent him. How do you send somebody? you have to have the resources in order to send them. And so there's, yeah, God calls us to follow him by giving up everything. And for Jim Elliot, that was his entire life. For you and me in this situation, maybe it's just saying, God, everything that I have is yours. And my heart position is that I'm not hanging on to anything. I don't need it. If you call me to go, I can drop anything and I can go. If you call me to work and stay and work hard so that my money can bless others, my income can bless others, it's all your money. And so here it is. And, we need both, right? And so in that way, the example of both is giving up everything, right? For one, it's a literal giving up everything. But for a lot who support him or support the missionaries or support the growth of God's kingdom, it's a heart posture of, I give you everything.
Yeah. Because it is hard to draw that line between wanting to give and trusting God, but also being responsible with, like, in that brings it back to, like, wanting to be a good steward of your money, right? It's that line of, I want to give, but I also want to manage my money, or like God's money, because like wanting to manage it properly.
I think that comes back to making that decision as you set up your budget. And so understanding your income, understanding based on that income, my first fruits are going back to God's kingdom directly. And so having that decision and then saying, okay, so then what am I saving? And then what are my needs? And then what are my desires? And so having that set up beforehand it is a wise stewardship model.
Yeah, because also part of it, like the reason why I'm asking this is because I want to know, and I want to make this this correlation for people, because I've struggled with this a little bit about myself as well, in the sense of, like, with me wanting to save money and wanting to have that emergency fund, and just like giving to God as well. With me wanting to be that financially responsible and steward of my money, or God's money.
Yeah.
Is that just having less faith in God, or like in trusting him, or like, do I have to just not rely on like any emergency fund? Do I just like go fully into faith, right? Like, how can we draw that line between, am I trusting God fully, or is that having less faith because I am saving money?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And the Bible, of course, gives both examples. But I think a good place to look for this wise posture is, the books of wisdom. So Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and seeing what's said in those books, and how God sets up the position of someone being wise as being ready for the risk that's in this world. And you mentioned emergency fund, right? And I think before we talked about how most people in the U.S. couldn't handle a $1,000 emergency. And so having that set up allows you to have the capacity to give, right? So if you set this up and you say, all right, my tithe is 10% right away. I'm gonna have whatever I come in, and it's 10%, and then the rest of your budget is down to the dime, and you know exactly what you have to spend. Well, what happens if you need new tires?
Yeah.
Right? And you weren't planning on that. All right, so maintenance is a different thing, but there was an unplanned expense such as new tires. What do you sacrifice? And most people would say, oh, I'm going to dig into my giving at this point because I don't have the emergency fund in order to cover this. And And of course, God would want me to have tires or something to that effect, right? And so you're, you're setting up this emergency fund in order to take care of those things that are inevitably going to happen because
Yeah.
things happen. And so with that set up, we're able to take the bumps up and down in life and still maintain that, what I call that steady, the plot and the day-to-day giving that we have to God. And so I think there's very much wisdom in setting up emergency accounts, right? I think in a lot of the reading that I've done, a lot of the studying that I've done, they talk about having a 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside for emergencies. And I think that's good. That's a lot of money. And that can, but if you start saying, oh, but what if? And now I go to 9 months. What if? And I go to 12 months. Where do you draw that line, right? And of course, scripture is not clear on this. And so it comes back to being wise, being humble, and being open to God. And if the most people that write financial books, run financial ministries, are saying 3 to 6 months, I can do the best that I can with the information that I have right now, which is 3 to 6 months of my expenses. And so I'm going to make that decision and set it aside and saying, I trust that person, right, who's running maybe Crown Financial Ministries is a big financial ministry that they have suggested this because of the wisdom that God's given them and because of their studying of finance and because of their relationship with God. And so I trust that. And so I'm going to do the same as a wise steward of my money, of God's money.
Yeah, because I feel like most of the time we can take out of context in the same way of saying, if I want to save money, I'm putting the trust in myself rather than in God. But not necessarily, right? It's just wanting to be wise.
Right. And so what's the opposite of that?
Yeah.
Is putting God to the test.
Yeah.
Right. And like, God, I know you're going to catch me if my tires blow, so I'm just not going to save for it. And right, what happens? And then is that, just say somebody's in that situation and they've put that responsibility, I will say, falsely put that responsibility on God. And then falsely, does God let them down if they can't buy the tires then? It's kind of a weird situation. And I think if God's provided this wisdom and you decide not to follow it because you trust God, then that's not truly trusting God. That's not following the wisdom that he's given you.
Yeah. No, that's actually really good. Well, on that note, I feel like we've covered pretty much the broad question of being a good steward with our money, right? Being a good steward with what God has given us to be able to provide back into his kingdom, right? So I just want to bring it back and just get a final conclusion remarks from you, just to be able to give it to our listeners and our viewers, to just kind of like a checklist of like, okay, 1, 2, and 3 things that I have done to be able to be a good steward with my financial situation.
Yeah. Wow. Great question, Danny. I think, I want to go back to Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes has long been my favorite book of the Bible. Are we supposed to choose favorites? I don't know, but it is. And a lot of people look at Ecclesiastes and be like, what the heck? Like, time for this, time for that. I don't get it. But what it really, it shows those ups and downs in life. And it talks about, the value of work, the value of working hard, enjoying your labor, enjoying God through your labor, enjoying the fruits of your labor with God, in communion with God, in communion with your neighbors and with your family. And then it says, the main point is to draw near and to be humble before God. And really, my checklist, right? Sorry, that's not a checklist. It's I'm just going to draw near and I'm going to be humble before God. Proverbs talks about how plans prosper with many advisors. I think your listeners and your viewers are probably in many different stages of life with this. But that proverb has hit me pretty hard, that wherever you are in your financial journey, in your walk with God, you need advisors. And you need people that can come around you and help walk with you. And whether that is reading the Randy Alcorn books, whether that is doing a Crown Financial course, or whether that is going to your pastor and saying, Pastor, I have debt and I don't know what to do. Can you help me? But finding someone to walk that journey with you. So maybe on a checklist, being humble before God, number one. Number two, don't go it alone. Go with advisors. And number three is set up your budget for success. Set up your budget so that your tithe is first. That's your first fruit before God. That is success. And number two, that you have margin in that budget so that on a day-to-day, you have the capacity to be generous. You have the capacity to enjoy with God, commune with God, and enjoy your time with Him. So
That's an awesome checklist to have. I've learned so much from just being able to talk with you, and I appreciate you coming into the podcast to be able to share this knowledge with the people that are watching or listening to this, because I've learned so much from just talking to you, and I'm thankful that you were able to share this with other people as well.
thanks, Danny. This was fun. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys for watching and listening to us. I hope to see you guys in the next episode.